Hello, good evening to everyone. I hope everyone's fine and well. After a while, we're doing a show in English. The subject today is Syria. A lot of people stated that after the takeover and the removal of Assad, the situation is going to be peaceful. It was some kind of a revolution which has come on board, but it seems like there are various stakeholders in the entire situation. There are freedom movements, there is sectarian issues, and we're going to elaborate where the things are going to go in those regards. So again, we've got Amir Gori with us, and Amir Bhai, the platform is all yours. Go ahead. How are you seeing this so far?
So, Claire, thank you very much. Maham, good afternoon. And people who are watching us wherever means good evening. Well, at times, yeah, it's good afternoon if they're watching us in North America. Uh, I think, there are a couple of intriguing things before we start discussing, the hardcore politics of it. And they are concerning uh, how the West is treating this main man who is now being described as uh, a former terrorist, but now, a moderate sort of leader of a movement which is bringing Syria towards hope. The first thing is that the Western media has started describing him from his real name, you know, and not from his which was used to be Abu Muhammad Jolani, because of the area he came from, and because the Israeli action in Golan Heights has become controversial. So he does not. People do not actually want to describe him. This is my take, that they do not actually want to describe him a person from the Golan Heights to keep him away from a direct confrontation with Israel or possible confrontation. Because Israel has made its intention very clear that they have secured the area for their own interest. Now, uh, the other thing is, when he was being interviewed by the Western media, including BBC, the concern are so frivolous. They don't actually want to discuss the hardcore issues. On one side, the interviewer was asking him about the possible rights of women and the open society or whatever, and then very frivolous question that would you allow people uh, to drink? Hmm? As if a country which has been devastated by years of war, for West, the ideas are only the important ideas for the West is are only because the female education, uh, their openness, and hijab, niqab, drinking. They are not talking about the actual and real threat to possible disintegration of the country, you know, and they are discussing the ideas that there are fault lines which are ethnic, which are sectarian, which is geographical, uh, and then comparisons between uh, Syria and Iraq, Syria and Afghanistan, where we saw the Shia Sunni divide, and in case particularly with Iraq, where what happened during the first Iraq War and the second Iraq War, and after we know that after the second Iraq War, Iraq disintegrated as a country. Why? Because the West has taken out the Kurdish area out of uh, Iraq and declared it as an independent or autonomous region. And what they did was, because Kurdistan, the Iraqi Kurdistan, did not have any strong economic footprint or economy. So what they did was that they took the oil fields from Kirkuk and gave them to these two men who have been fighting against each other for the control of the Iraqi Kurdish area, Masood uh, Talabani and Jalal Talabani and Masood Barzani. And over the years, now both men, they had sons, and now both Masood's son, Masroor, is the prime minister of this region, and Jalal's son, he's both American educated, Ivy League universities. Now, one is prime minister and one is the deputy prime minister. Now, there are possibilities of seeking uh, a similar kind of treatment to the Syrian Kurdistan or the Kurdish area if Turkey does not play ball with the Western plans. So there are real dangers that because this is not just Shia Sunni, the ethnic is the Syrian and the Kurdish, and then the religious divide, which is between the Muslims and the Druze and the Maronite Christians. So the uh, recipe is pretty uh, ready. You guys gonna cook a complete disaster dish for Syria. The Western media is describing because they have taken care of Bashar al-Assad, who they could not dislodge when the project of Arab Spring started back in 2011. And we saw that all the Maghreb countries, barring Morocco was not touched, but Algiers and Tunisia and Libya, and then you know, they for reasons very well known to international community, which keeps an eye on Near and Middle East and Maghreb area, that they do not touch Egypt because Egypt is in league with the Egypt and Jordan. They are in agreements with Israel. So what we saw is that because they very successfully taken care of uh, Bashar al-Assad's regime, and he was forced to run. So it was a defeat of Bashar. It was total defeat of the Russian interest in the country and the Iranian interest. So that is why the West is happy. I'm saying, quote unquote, with this man. And then they're describing him, the interviews, the pictures, being taken that ACV a liberator of Iraqi people. And they're giving examples that in the area of Idlib, where he was in control for many years now, that how it has become peaceful. Although, there are criticism that women are not being allowed to live a full and free life there. But the area which was destroyed by the years of war, they said that he has brought peace. So technically, my point is that I am slightly perplexed whether this man who was on the terrorist list of America, of United Nations, of Europe and UK, why all of a sudden this man is not now being described as a former Al Qaeda, former Nusra, and person who was actually fighting ISIS. So it is. I think early days the Western forces or the Western governments will be seeing how Turkey will play out its role. If Iran, who has been seriously defeated in its interest by Israeli action in Palestine and then in Lebanon and of course Syria, how they will try to get back to some sort of disrupting exercise. They can use, although they have pulled out their mujahideen or so-called mujahideen, the forces which were training Syrian forces, they have pulled them out. But tomorrow they can again. They have gone back to the drawing board, and I think we'll see when the weather changes. The weather is not good at this time, so maybe springtime we'll see how the interplay of regional powers impact the country.
So there's another interesting question which emerged in the UK Parliament as well, and it was directly asked at Prime Minister's question time as well last week, and it's been a continuous question that how can an organization be a terrorist organization a week ago, and now they've kind of all of a sudden not only become acceptable, but you're basically saying they're reformed. So how does somebody like Golani get reformed, and how do they justify the reformation? Is what kind of proof are they given in terms of reformation?
No, on simple terms, we can say that, the old dictum that an enemy of my enemy is my friend. So because uh, Jolani has taken Bashar al-Assad down and out of Syria, he has delivered on the thing. When he tried his luck, first time, he was not successful, and West was criticized that all the Western forces, which were allegedly helping ISIS and other groups, in Syria, they were squarely defeated by Bashar al-Assad's forces. Why? Because at that time Russia and Iran were supporting him. This time, uh, both these countries. One, because Iran, the way I said, has taken serious knocks in all the countries in the Middle East. Uh, and Russia was heavily involved for now, over years in Ukraine. So their economy was stretched, their resources were stretched, but to an extent that we stories you must have read that people from or soldiers from North Korea were fighting for Russians in that theater. Hmm? So that means when the West has recently injected another $56 billion for Zelensky's administration. Now, Zelensky was, until yesterday, Zelensky was an actor and a comedy actor. And now he's been, depicted as a champion of democracy in that. Why? Because he said that, if whenever war ends, he may join NATO. And Russians are saying that that was not the understanding. The understanding was that NATO will not move eastwards toward hardcore Russian territories, and certain countries which are between NATO and Russia will be treated as buffer states. So coming back to Syria, I think because this man has delivered for Syrian public, we this is too early to gauge how he starts behaving when remember he has allowed the former prime minister to continue, to head the administration. So when they say that, listen, what they will definitely, as sharp and cunning people who need all the guns and weapons from the West. If tomorrow there is a challenge from other groups, because the uh, Syrian army has, fizzled out. All the generals, I don't know whether they were on the take or what, they vanished. As if, how can a standing army of a country just, vanish in thin air? So that
That's
means
because a lot of those people in army were actually forced into it. There are stories of many soldiers who ran away and then they were brought back and they were punished. So a lot of soldiers, when they found out that Jolani have taken most of the area, they dropped their weapon and ran away because they didn't want to be in that army in the first
reason,
place.
reason is, ma'am, when they see that, the person or the forces which are fighting them, one, they're well equipped, well resourced, well funded. For many years, uh, the salaries of the Syrian army did not see an uptick, you know, and nobody actually wants to die for a person who was about to run away. But remember, we need to see that while the domestic scene settles down in Syria, we need to see whether Russia can keep both its bases, the naval base and the air base in the Mediterranean, to keep a sort of watching eye on Africa and also the movement through Red Sea of the NATO troops or NATO deployments. Because remember, the American base in Qatar, the headquarters of the Central Command, most of the ships, you know, swim through or sail through Red Sea, and the Al Hamimim air base and Tartak air base, whether, again, too early to see whether Russia can keep them or not, and whether this man will fight Russia, and whether Russia will be interested, to invest in this area uh, militarily, because they cannot have these two friends. Uh, the game which comes to mind is that the West, and especially America, because America is, over thousands of miles away from the mainland. not only Middle East, Africa, or Europe. They are protected by the seas on the both sides, oceans, on the both sides. So what they're doing is they are making their Western European allies and themselves to fund a war to bleed Russia, or Russian economy, the way they bled them in Afghanistan. So the war is now almost, in its third year. Uh, so I think if Russia remains involved there and does not come back to Syria, we only have to see, what is the interest. The strongest character or partner in this whole game is Turkey at the moment. They are holding a lot of cards, because they have allowed the faction which they were supporting, the Syrian National Army (SNA), uh, to fight alongside uh, HTS. Hmm? So we need to see, if the West will support this group long term, if they are, because remember, Turkey is part of NATO, and but they do not actually like, and they would not like to see um, the Syrian Kurds getting interesting ideas that tomorrow they can actually have an autonomous region just like Iraq. And not many people know that this area, which is the eastern Syria, which is the Syrian Kurdistan, is also, economically uh, rich area. The person, Mazloum Kobani, who heads the Syrian Army's brigade, they're earning around about $500 million every year. So apart from
There's
oil,
another interesting question which comes to mind. If we were to take Golani on his word, we have to kind of realize that who is consistent of his forces, or the collaboration, and when you look deeper into it, what you realize just below the surface, that you've got rebels and students who are moderates. You've got Islamic groups who've collaborated, the Hayatul Tahrir and Al Shamsi, like you've mentioned. Then you've got Western countries who are backing them at the moment, which is a surprise. You've got the Kurds over there, and they want a separate homeland. If that was not enough, then you've got an outright Shia conflict in that situation between the Asna Ashri Shias and the Alawites. Alawites are basically not considered Muslims by a lot of Shiite people, and there are internal Shiite group riots in that as well. In terms of army presence, again, direct involvement, like you've rightfully mentioned, Turkey, Iran is there, Russia is there, you've got United States forces there, and you've got Saudi Arabia and Qatar as regional players. But on top of that, the icing on top is that you've got Israel right in there as well. So does Golani actually have the capability of managing all these groups, including ISIS, and not to mention that Assad is going to strike back as well. So this seems like a recipe for a huge disaster to me.
I think, we have to see how Golani behaves tomorrow. At the moment, he is not in any mindset to pick up a fight with Israel. Although Israel has, taken control of historically Syrian areas, the Golan Heights, which they took, and they refused to give them back. They recognized Golan Heights, or the occupied Golan Heights, as part of Israel in 2011, and then in 2019, United States accepted that. The thing is, whatever movement we are seeing at the moment, one of the most important element in this thing is that because United States is in a flux, one administration is goodbye, they have packed their bags, and in a month's time they'll be gone. And then new administration of Donald Trump will be coming in with a completely new team. Now, technically, I think many of your viewers must know, or if they don't, So I can say that ordinarily, the new administration will bring around about 18,000 new people into the administration, in different departments. Mostly they will come from universities, subject specialists, or they will create a new bureaucracy. And then we'll see, how Trump wants to behave towards this region. And that is why in the meantime, countries are keeping very low profile, including United Kingdom. And whatever they're saying is just run-of-the-mill statements that we are keeping an eye and then, we are concerned. What is the concern? Concern is one, the constant migration of Syrians should stop now. If the war ends and if the brutal regime and brutal and suppressive regime of Bashar al-Assad is gone, so technically Syrians should start going back. And that is the biggest interest of Turkey as well, because Turkey at the moment is uh, housing around about 3 million Syrian refugees. It's one of the biggest refugee supporting country at the moment. So if these people start going back, and if there is a semblance of peace, and if this man really shows that he has a change of heart, so
No,
very
even if he was to take a change of heart, if you look at who he's leading, like the groups, some of the groups I've mentioned, who are indirectly and directly supporting him, do you think he's able to, does he have the capability to manage all these factions, the Kurds, the Alawites, uh, um, the moderates, as well as the religious, the Israel issue, the Turkish involvement within the country, the Iranians are in and out of the country, the Americans, ISIS, Al Qaeda. This seems like this
the
doesn't seem like an easy job.
I would beg to disagree. I think he has all around. He has now factions or countries which would like peace within Syria. Hmm? The only troubled country would be uh, Lebanon, where Hezbollah might not be satisfied with the situation. They've already said that the land route through which they used to actually get the support from Iran is not shut. They have lost, that support coming through Syria. So if you basically say that, okay, we freeze the Syrian-Israeli relationship where they are, the Turkey is supportive of the action. They are happy that Bashar al-Assad is gone. The biggest neighbor, Iraq, is in a mess itself, so they don't actually have any interest in stoking fire inside Syria. Uh, Jordan has always been completely, apolitical in this region. They do not get involved after 73 war, whether diplomatically or militarily. So technically, they can leave Syria to its own fate. And there, they will not like to dislodge this man at the moment. They might not recognize him. Just like the Afghan government, they might not like to recognize him and support him financially and militarily. He would need definitely guns if he really wants to fight. But nobody wants to fight them. Why? Because they are, in the absence of the Syrian army, and in the absence of a bigger political group. Alawites are very, very few in numbers when you put them in context with other groups within. Similar is Maronite Christians. They do not have now, for many, many decades, they do not have the long history or even uh, sort of what you say intention to start a military conflict. They actually wanted peace in the country where they can have whatever piece of the pie they have. So I think this man is lucky in a sense that although he was a declared terrorist and now a moderate person, and his interviews or whatever are being printed, they give you a complete sense, how he will be treated. And if, for example, tomorrow, he's recognized by, this is going to be the biggest test, just like Taliban. Taliban government has brought peace to Afghanistan, or at least it is not boiling the way it was boiling. over into the other regions, and that is why they're acceptable. But on the other hand, apart from few quid coming from the United Nations sort of helping hand, nobody's helping Afghanistan. So similarly, Syria, we have to see whether it will, you know, basically go down to that situation where nobody recognizes this regime. So that means, okay, we leave you in peace, but we are not kind of giving you, any bread or milk or eggs or whatever
Okay,
that you want.
like for example, just like we looked at the Alawites. If we look at the Kurds, Kurds have been looking for an independent homeland for years within Turkey as well as in Iran and also parts of Syria. Now, for instance, if the Kurds are supporting Golani at this moment in time, uh, obviously, he's not going to give away a free Kurdistan to these people. He might, even if he is to say tomorrow and he announces that we might give you a semi autonomous kind of area or something along those lines, would Turkey agree to that? Wouldn't that be threatening for Turkey as well as for Iran? And on top of that, would other Syrians support Golani or whichever government comes into power that Kurds should be free or get some kind of a Kurdish homeland?
I take your point, and I think unless and until the West wants to stoke fire in the Kurdish area, you know, Turkey holds all the cards, and the confidence, which is very palpable. You see what is happening in Ankara about this development in Syria. They are pretty okay, and they, to an extent, may be overconfident in certain senses when they say that they will behave the way we want them to behave. Now, remember, when Iraq was brought down, when Saddam Hussein was killed, and Iraq was broken down into regions. Why? Because they needed the oil, and the oil was all the Iraqi oil was, extracted, pulled, and then shipped out of Iraq by a company called Halliburton. Now, Halliburton was a company which was owned by Dick Cheney, who was at that time the vice president of America. Hmm? Uh, so the thing is, if the West does not help the Syrian Kurds, I don't think that this guy will actually have the means to fight a war with people who are on the other side are supported by some factions. Like, for example, if tomorrow Iran starts pumping money into Syria, you know, so automatically what will happen? Israel will start helping Golani's government.
Of course.
It's just like Hamas versus Fatah.
And they've already kind of announced that, and there's if we look at it in a more holistic way, in recent past we had the BRIC conference, and a lot was announced in terms of global South, and obviously what was referred to as global South, if we look at those countries majorly, the A countries being China and Russia. And then you had countries like India in the second tier. Right now, if you look at them, it seems like when it comes to the Middle East, the Palestinians are nowhere to be heard anymore after this Syrian event has taken place. If you look at Ukraine, again, that is somewhere where Russia has kind of gone quiet. If you look at India, again, India is like Jay Shankar usually likes to speak very, very candidly, but at this moment in time, all he can talk about is Bangladesh. So it means where for 2 or 3 years, it seemed like the what is known as the global south or emerging global south was like the new kid on the block. It seems like United States have knocked them out with one simple thing in Syria. And it seems like if even if they've got nothing to lose, if there's disaster in Syria in times to come, that is something which is reminiscent of foreign policy. I'm so sure you must have heard of it, the Henry Kissinger foreign policy, which basically is perfectly fitting in this situation. If Syria develops into a huge chaos, it's not going to trouble Israel. Israel is going to benefit. It's not
No,
going
Israel
to
is, yeah,
say.
Israel, is sitting pretty fine, pretty tight. They know that they cannot be challenged, and the material, the literature, international relations literature about this region is that when you create doubt in the minds of people, the doubts which were created among the Palestinian people, for example, Palestinian people from the West Bank, that Hamas is a group which has been purposefully created by the Mossad, and as if the leaders who are fighting Israel are technically on payroll. Exactly like that. This small group which has taken over, people are still writing about it. How can a group which was or which could have been outnumbered by a Syrian army if the Syrian army was not fizzled away, they could have taken him down. The thing is, if tomorrow he starts getting guns and weapons, and remember, the guns and weapons are the biggest stakeholders in this region, and we have asked, means I have actually asked this question to important American officials that listen, how come the countries which are completely blockaded by hostile countries keep getting fresh oil or fresh, produce, and then, the peace, does not, peace or whatever means they have, they do not make the country strong now in Middle East. So it might be the interest of all the regional countries and neighbors to keep Syria divided, you know, and so that it can go on creating news stories for magazines around the world, and it will show the West in good light that they are trying to, you know, put together the country the way it was with a popular leader. They will find a popular leader somewhere, if he's already not living in France or England itself, they will find somebody. But the thing is, at the moment, I think Gulani is the best bet for Israel, for Turkey, for Jordan, for even Saudi Arabia, and Iran. You know, unless you see a faction which will emerge sooner or later and gang up again, but it will be seen whether they go back into the fighting areas of Lebanon or Palestine or not. But as far as Syria Central is, unless somebody supports them, those people do not have money or weapons to go on for endless conflict, endless wars. So technically, I think whatever he's saying, and in his interviews, Ghani has said that he wanted to show a, a pluralistic and intolerant religion rather than what some of our mullahs keep saying.
But Syria already have some factions fighting in some part of its country, and then there are Asad al-Bashar's. Some of the Bashar al-Assad. I said his name wrong. Bashar al-Assad's loyalists who went to Iraq to start their own liberation kind of thing for Syria because they think that now Syria is occupied. So there are already people starting fights around all around Syria.
Yeah, this is what they. If, for example, they have been doing it for decades. This is the only thing they know. To kill people, to use guns and weapons. These people have not tried to develop a country. We have seen images of Syria literally going to the dogs in the last 10, 15 years. I know the country has been in sort of a civil war since, I think, parts of it since
2011.
even before that. Means it
2011.
was not a peaceful country. It was not a country which was, technically, if you describe Syria, Syria was the last outpost of the Roman Empire. So, the tourist remains and the buildings, and then the history of a very rich history of the Islamic caliphate, which
Empires.
was yeah, which was developed there, and then the Fatimids, and then uh, all the history. You know, this country was not at peace for many many years. Remember Bashar al-Assad's father, Hafiz al-Assad. He took over the reins of the government as a very middle-ranking military officer in 1971. Hmm? So they have been there for almost 50 to 53 years. So in these 50 years, when you have completely unparalleled and unhindered control of a land, what have you achieved? If you go to Syria, it looks like, apart from few patches of the urban areas which are planned, etc., the rest of Middle East, sorry, Syria looks like a pauperized country, completely terrorized and pauperized, whose most many hundreds of thousands of people have been killed in the internal wars. You know, for remember this country was center ground for ISIS for many years, and the neighbors were scared. Okay, if for example these guys end the war here, and if they go back to the countries they come from. I remember doing a story many years ago, and somebody told me, a source told me that around 900 Pakistanis were fighting alongside Syria in inside Syria. And our question was that tomorrow, if some of them are, uh, when they are done with the war and
Back to
they
back.
go back home, they go back home. Now these are battle-hardened, terrorists. So
Dangerous
yeah,
individuals.
so that's why I'm saying that the interest for the moment is who will like Syria, destabilize from where it is now. I think those countries uh, are in the region. They would, like say, Israel would not like any administration, whether administration is led by this interim prime minister and Golani together, but they will not want a strong working government in Damascus. You know, Similarly, Turkey will not like chaos in the country. Similarly, Iraq will not like. Iraq is still going through, the pains of the war. So who will try to, if we have, that's what I'm saying, that if we have to see, wait and see that who takes the control of this man. If this man is taken control of by the Americans and the Westerns, then the Russians and the Iranians will, start pinching this country from the margins. That listen, this
So,
story.
so the interesting factor is, in light of what you've just stated, if we look at the current figures, there are about 40,000 foreign fighters from over 100 countries in Syria currently, and that's a low estimate. Some organizations are pitching it to be around 100, but the official kind of number is 40,000. Now, the question is, not all these people are fighting in the same lines. Some of them are with Hezbollah, some of them are with ISIS, some of them are with Golani, some of them happen to be Kurds from all around, some of them are doing it for Islamic cause. Now, unless Golani was supported by the West and a quote unquote United States in particular, I do not see any possibility of Golani being able to, by force or by hook or crook, at least not verbally, he's not going to be able to convince all these people to just one day stop their conflict and stop fighting. So, would you say that there's a chance that Syria, being as volatile as it is, with Israel showing what they can do. They're like, some are estimating only 25, 30 kilometers away from Damascus at this moment in time, turn into a regional conflict. And this might begin to spurt into countries like Turkey on one side, Iran, all the way up till Afghanistan.
I think even if all these factions do not fight or start fighting, Saklan, my concern would be that these people who have been part of any guerrilla outfit for last 20, 25, 30 years,
Mm.
they do not have any experience, a real experience of running a state, running a city, running a government, you know. So their only experience, whether you look them in Afghanistan in the form of Taliban, look at what actually happened first between Iraq and Iraq war for almost a decade, and then the wars between Saddam Hussein and the Bush Senior, Bush Junior, Clinton, whatever. The only asset they had, their fighting capability, and that is why when they were basically ready to fight, uh, the biggest business in this world is gun running. You know, so this is a normal question that, for example, when ISIS was trying to take control of northern Syria and eastern Turkey, both these countries bombed them out so much that they had to run to, to a source that, listen, we are controlling this area and we have the skills, management skills, to run a country and turn it around. They do not have that. They did not actually have
But
in Iraq.
didn't this Golani people were running their own government in Idlib?
It was not, Mohammed, it was not a government. It was a faction because there was no government there. Technically,
No,
Bashar al-Assad
they
was
had
sitting
their
as a
own.
president.
They had no, they had their own prime minister as well. I think he is also becoming part of this government.
You can,
He
you
was
can, you
running
can
Idlib.
you can call any man prime minister or president or chief minister or whatever, or military chief, but the thing is they were actually holding an area where the ability of the central government, which was Bashar al-Assad, did not have any intention to go and take it back, and that is why, because they knew that on the other side, the group which was in that region, the uh, Syrian National Army, was supported by Turkey on the other side. So why would Bashar al-Assad go and start a fight and get into direct war with Turkey, knowing that if he did, he would have been slapped really hard. And similarly, the SDF, the Syrian Democratic Forces in the Syrian Kurdish area, they're controlling that area. Bashar al-Assad did not have any intention of going and taking full control of the region. So he was happy, you know, living in Damascus, and his army was happy, taking control of the surrounding cities like, Homs or Hama, and so they were not even ready to go to Idlib all the way to fight a war which they knew that they would lose. And the way they were brutalized by ISIS, nobody. I know that many people know that, and many people have written about it and discussed it. That how can a country which was landlocked, you know, most of the sense, because ISIS did not actually control the Syrian ports, because there was Russia sitting there. They had, a naval base there. So who was giving them guns and weapons for years and years? And not just guns and weapons, brand new Toyota Jeeps. And what they were, basically taken there in, American transport planes, or who was dropping them? Who was giving them those things? So that's why when this man is taking control of it and he does not want to fight now, he is, if he wanted to take control of, Syria as an Islamist leader, although moderate now, the dichotomy was that why aren't you basically taking your own areas back from Israel? Hmm? You're not as weak, Syria is not as weak as Hamas in Palestine, or not as small as Hezbollah in Lebanon. Remember, you know, imagine your capital city is being bombed by weapons, powerful weapons, you know, day after day, week after week. And the question was, so where is the Lebanese army? Hezbollah is not, assigned the job of protecting Lebanon from anybody. It was just a group. So just like now, this group which has been funded, remember, this group has been funded to fight a war and raise a militia. You know, if he keeps it and if he does not, what do you say, the balance of power is not tilted in any other group's favor. So this guy will sit tight because the West is not against it, and that's why we say that listen, we will have to see what actually happens about this region, which is the Near and Middle East, when Trump takes over on 21st of January, whether he will like to get involved in any way, or he want Syria. Remember, the conspiracy theorists would say that the policy is to break the countries around Israel into smaller factions so they cannot challenge Israel's hegemony in the area. And
But
then,
would you say that's a conspiracy anymore? It seems to be happening. I
uh,
mean, they
yeah,
would
but
maybe for different reasons portrayed by them, but it's physically happening.
but thing is, Mr. Clan, this is a fact that Hamas was getting guns, from somebody.
Mm.
So they were not producing it. They did not actually have gun factories in Gaza. I have been to Gaza twice,
Mm.
So I have been into the tunnels which led to, you know, Egyptian areas. So whether they were bringing guns or vegetables or, you know, things of because the rest of Gaza was blockaded from all sides. Even they could not take their boats out into the sea. Why? Because in the 3 nautical miles, the gunboats, the Israeli gunboats, were anchored there, and they would. The moment you take a boat beyond a point, they will start shooting at you. So similarly, the Syria, when one it has taken control of the war, that maybe we are seeing from the lens where we see that this country may disintegrate.
Mm.
Now reverse the argument 180 degrees. What if this man, sits with the other factions the way he said that he would like to be an inclusive and peaceful and all the words which sell well in Europe and America, uh, because Russia and Iran would sit back and see, they are licking their wounds at the moment. Uh, I don't know how they will behave, but if they actually want to disturb this guy, then automatically this man might be becoming a darling of the West. He will start getting the guns and weapons and start fighting groups which might be funded by either Iran or Russia.
Of course, and so with that, I'll come to the final point, and the final question which I basically had was, would you say this is very reminiscent of Cold War era, where on one side in Afghanistan, we basically saw the jihadis and the Taliban. Later on, they turned into Taliban, and Al Qaeda kind of being sponsored by the West. And today in 2024, we have a situation where um, Taliban, after the Doha Agreement, are pretty much left on their own accord. And if something happens, according to the Doha Agreement, one of the first clauses is that they cannot go against American interests. So there's kind of a mutual ceasefire between the two factions. And then you've got this Syria thing developing. It seems like all the parties are exactly the same. The countries together seem to be same. If we talk about Pakistan again, with this Syrian thing and what's happened with Taliban and everything in recent times, seem to be back in the American camp, slapped back into the American camp. India, if we look at Indians, they were staying pretty neutral, but after the Syrian thing and the Ukraine and the BRICS situation, they seem to be uh, in trouble. They have to soon make a decision where they're going to end up. Are they going to be again backing the Cold War situation? So it's no different. The pieces are being set to the Cold War era, if you think about it, apart from two or three countries or factions.
I don't see, the return of Cold War in this region. Why? Because a
No,
Cold
no,
War,
in terms of not in a return of Cold War, but in terms of sides being changed.
I personally think again, because we are still, literally weeks after what we saw, uh, there are definitely elements where we can compare them with a situation like Afghanistan, there where Taliban, sat on their motorbikes and rode to Kabul without any challenge. And the question was that what actually happened to the 350,000 soldiers which were trained by spending billions of dollars by the Americans? That means they did not believe that whatever they were as long as they're getting their guns and their uniforms and ammunition, so they can go around frightening other Afghan people. But listen, this man, no Taliban leader has got such positive media, the word this man, Gulani, has got in the last, 1 week or so.
Absolutely, I agree.
And remember, I think maybe 7, 8, or maybe 15 weeks. One of the stories on the Financial Times front page was that the gun making companies in America are very confident of boom ahead. And people like me, I said, where would they fight a war? Because all these gun runners are not making guns and weapons just for the show. So they
Of
make
course.
sure that those guns and weapons are used and then disused so that they can sell them, the new weapons which they're producing. So the story said that maybe certain parts of the world are now again ripe for conflict. And, mm, again, not going into uh, conspiracy theories. When I went to study in England many, many years ago, uh, I was actually asked, and because this was my subject, near Middle East and modern South Asia, one of my teachers who taught me Middle East, uh, asked me to write one of the essays on possibility of independent Kurdistan. Hmm? So I picked up all the books available in SOAS and LSE libraries and did a lot of research. What I produced was, though I got, good marks in it, but not exceptional marks. Because my teacher said that, you have done a lot of research, but you were not bold enough to predict uh, a sort of a future scenario where there's a possibility of an independent Kurdistan. And I told my teacher, I said, listen, Kurdistan was divided between four countries. Hmm? So I don't see any chances of all four countries getting independence from Iraq, from Turkey, from Syria, and from Iran. And he said, maybe not, but what if one of them get? Now, this is, early 90s. The first Iraq war had just finished, and the leaders of Kurdistan, both Masood and Jalal, could not fight Saddam Hussein. But thing is, within 8 years, Saddam Hussein was gone, and these guys were in control of Kurdistan. And Kurdistan, by making an independent, autonomous region with oil. Remember, when we were talking about the Alawites in uh, Syria. Similarly, Saddam Hussein and his family, who were from Tikrit, they were Tikritis in the higher positions in Iraq, all vanished. Either killed or vanished. The thing is, that sort of thing is not today, but I'm telling you the conspiracy theory that I'll call it conspiracy theories with full credit to my teachers. They were so uh, thinking forward ahead because they were, dealing and of course advising the governments on these regions, that they saw that there's a possibility tomorrow if they actually want to recreate. If you created the countries, remember these countries were created after the First World War, and the line was that we drew lines in the sand and make these countries which used to be under Ottoman Empire. And when the Ottoman Empire collapsed after the First World War, all these areas which were not countries became countries. And in the last 80 years, these people
Nation
have
states.
taken upon themselves that they were Bahrainis and there were Qataris and there were Syrians and there were this and that. And I said, listen, until 1914, you were not. You were all part of the Ottoman Empire, you know. And these now, this is so easy now because remember another thing. If somebody has the time to do research, what we did at that time, situation was different. But a lot of Western universities have given scholarships to students from these countries who actually wanted to study politics and international relations to come and study what? Ethnicity and group culture and history, and a particular history of a tribe, particular history of whatever. And these people, just like Pakistanis, when they came back, and they had this idea that, oh, listen, I have been a Baloch or a Pathan or a Punjabi or Sindhi for 5,000 years, and I am a
As
Muslim only
in,
for
yes.
1,500 years, and I'm a Pakistani only for
For
60 years.
1400 years.
Yeah, and so you are asking us to be, a Pakistani or a Muslim first. We have Indus Valley civilizations and whatever. I said, then go back to Hinduism. Reconvert, become a Buddhist. You actually want to keep, one entity because that sells, and you actually want to throw away the other entity by saying that, we do not believe in this nation state. And exactly like that, all these when we started this program, that if you are a Maronite, whether you're a Maronite, what is so sanctimonious to you? Being Maronite or being Syrian? Being Syrian or, being Middle Eastern? And these divisions, you do not kind of see those divisions, playing up. We saw that in England when it came so close to losing Scotland, when Scotland actually had this referendum, but they had means, because they allow freedom of speech or whatever, but they retained it. And similarly, at that time, remember before UK, did Brexit and came out of Europe, similar movements which we saw in Scotland, we saw in Catalonia in Spain, and we saw the similar situation in Italy, where the richer areas started saying that we don't actually want to be in Italy, we don't actually want to be in Spain, we don't want to be in United Kingdom. Why? Because you're taking our resources, and because the poorer regions are. And similarly, we see that I don't actually want to bring Pakistani case in it, but this the bada सूबा छोटा सूबा वो हमारे खा गया, वो हमारे ये चीजें ले गया, गैस यहाँ से निकली वहाँ पहुँच गई. So all these things are sure, okay, fine, we can fight on these points. You actually want to fight or you want to solve? And if you want to solve, let's sit together and try to solve. But because people who are holding important positions, the elite grab in all of these societies, whether it's Pakistan, whether it's many countries in Middle East, the stories which come out later that, oh my God, they had $31 billion stashed in where? Swiss banks, not in an Iraqi bank or a Syrian bank or a Jordanian bank.
It's
These
always the
guys
Western who's facilitating.
sorry.
It's always the Western countries who are facilitating that money.
Because last point before we wrap up this debate today, Mr. Glenn, the thing is, we cannot separate history from politics, and we cannot study history in isolation from other histories. History is like flowing river. So if you are in Syria, you need to see when Bashar al-Assad fell, Abdullah of Jordan survived. When Abdullah was sitting tight here, they did not do anything when Saddam was taken down, when Gaddafi was taken down. Gaddafi is on, there's so many clips on the social media where what Gaddafi was saying, when he was crying wolf, It actually happened to that country. It happened to what Saddam said. Why? Because they were picked up by the West. You know, they were not, sort of revolutionary guards of of the French Revolution. These guys were opportunists who were supported by the West at that time, and they overthrew the regimes because those regimes were at that time what actually happened to Mossadegh in Iran. You know, and they not only brought families, they made them royal families. Excuse me, the Pahlavis were never a royal family. His father
Mm.
was
It
a
was just
military
his
general.
father who became a king. Mm.
Yeah, exactly. And but so we need one. We need to actually study history the way history should be read. The sad part is, in our part of the world, we have created, wrong divinities about our countries, about our regions, about personalities which we like, and we have extreme hatred for the other people. They're all politicians. And last word from me, when I remember, somebody actually asked uh, two examples. One was by Disraeli, who was a 19th century, late 19th century British Prime Minister. Somebody actually asked him because in those days, the politics between Disraeli and Gladstone was exactly like what we see between Zardari and Nawaz Sharif and Imran Khan. Uh, uh, so he was actually asked by a reporter, Prime Minister, what's the difference between? He was so sick of the politics of that time, and he said, what's the difference between a politician and a juggler? And reportedly, the Prime Minister said, well, a juggler cannot trick so many people so many times. And he said, oh, so a politician can. And he said, well, these are not my words. I did not say that. And many decades later, when Churchill was actually asked by somebody, he said, how would you define a good politician? And he said, a good politician is a person who can sell promises to people, and then he should be able to sell reasons why those promises could not be kept. You know, and if you actually want to again come to the 80s, Ronald Reagan, once said about democracy and the government, he said the nine most horrible words of English language are, and I quote, that I'm from the government and I'm here to help. No. No government helps its peoples. They create this aura that where people, get something and they remain happy. And, the grand politics of the world, as exactly like they changed the empires to nation state, and the nation states are, were sold to us as if they were divine structures.
So,
I just want to add something here, Amir sir. There is this series, Star Trek Discovery. In the very
Mm.
episode, in the very start, there is a Klingon leader. Klingon is an alien race. There is his leader, he's called the Kuvma. So the Kuvma is giving speech to his people, and he's talking about how treacherous these people are. And then he goes like, and they bring their treachery with the words that we come in peace. And
Yes.
what you just said, it reminded me of that.
Yeah, but people do not
They,
actually ask, hey, how do you spell peace? Maybe it's not the Peace. Maybe it's
they forget the
yeah,
PIE.
S. They
Yeah,
forget
no,
the S in
pieces.
the end.
Yeah,
no,
yeah,
maybe PIECE, peace, like a
yeah,
piece.
Shaji.
Peace.
Also, if you all of these wars that everybody been fighting are just American and Russian wars. I think it's about time America and Russia take their war to Alaska and fight it there. Why make the rest of the world fight their wars?
but we
I think that's the
cannot
only
kill the
solution.
we cannot kill the polar bears. Come on, polar bears
We
have
can we can
rights.
take them to. We have polar bears in Antarctica.
Okay,
Animal rights.
with that, I just wanted to add one small piece, which you mentioned, Amir, by yourself as well, that these countries did not exist before, and there's a very interesting guy. People can search him up, Lord Curzon. In
Yeah.
1919, he proposed to the British Parliament that this is how it's supposed to. They drew up a plan, it was proposed, it was accepted by the Brits. Then it was taken to France in the Paris Peace Conference in 2019, and it was finalized in 1921 how these countries are going to be split. in which ways you can basically do it, how it can be orchestrated. And it's a very good read for all those people who've never come across that. It goes in detail as far as stating that give them heroes, give them a liberator, give them a father of the nation, and where required, provide them religion and give them a religious and cultural cushion. So they become Syrians, they become Pakistanis, they become Indians.
And that's what, no, but if in one of your next programs, if we can discuss Pakistan and Pakistan's history, the way it is sold to us, and what actually history was, whether it was an Islamic state or a nation state, and if nation state, was there a nation called Pakistani in India? No, it was not. So it's an interesting subject. We will discuss it if you want in one
Yeah,
of your
definitely.
programs.
I think that's a very interesting one, and this is in line with what's happening in Middle East right now as well, and how those countries were created.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is there are 64 Muhammad Ali Jinnahs and Gandhis in the world today, and they
But it's
all
not.
those have their own Allama Iqbal as well.
Mm.
So, like Che Guevara and what do you call him? What's that guy of Cuba? I forgot his name. I have really bad
Fidel
memory.
Castro.
Yeah,
The
Castro.
world was
Che
divided
Guevara and Castro.
Yeah.
but they're from the other side. They're from the Soviet side, so they divided
Yeah,
their
but
own.
I don't think all this is playing well for West as well. I mean, all these refugees coming into their land now that Syria is liberated and somewhat, they're
Maybe
already
in
planning to remove the refugees. They're like, just
Oh,
go
they've
home.
stopped
no, no,
accepting
no.
any new refugees applications in the UK this week as well.
They will, I'm telling you, in 50 years' time, maybe these refugees who used to be
We'll take over
refugees,
London.
not London. London is already called Londonistan, by the way. There are books called Londonistan. And London now is 53% non-white city. Out of the
Mashallah.
32, yeah, out of the 32 boroughs of London, 30 had Labour MPs. And all of these MPs are not Gore. They're from ethnic minorities. And that is why Sadiq Khan, a Pakistani, is the third time mayor of London, the
Of
most
London.
known city in the world, you know.
I
But
think one of England's national dish is also chicken tikka masala.
Chicken tikka
No, it was
masala
not one. No, it
invented.
was not one. It is the most now.
No, it is considered one of the national foods,
Yeah,
like
the national food.
officially.
Yeah. The other national food which is liked by Saklan is fish and chips.
Fish and chips.
I like chips.
Next time when we're together in London, I'll take you to a brilliant fish and chip shop in in West Croydon.
Okay. Interesting.
Okay, I guess we're done for today. Thank you for listening.
Yes.
Subscribe to the channel. Leave comments if you like the show. I will be back again with another show. Till then, good evening, good night, and good day.